Welcome to the Oncology Voice Network podcast, connecting the voices that move oncology drug development forward.
Today, we're examining one of the most underestimated forces shaping oncology innovation: leadership architecture. In a field defined by long development timelines, scientific risk, and high-stakes execution, strategy is only as strong as the people tasked with carrying it forward. And yet, many organizations still treat executive hiring as reactive rather than as a deliberate long-term design. Our guest today brings a rare vantage point on that reality. Michael Pietrack is a managing director in pharmaceutical and biotechnology search with nearly 20 years of experience placing senior leaders across the industry. He also co-founded TMAC Direct, an executive search firm devoted to medical affairs, giving him a deep insight into how oncology organizations build leadership teams. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. You know, I'm a big admirer of yours for a long time, and I love what you guys are doing with OVN, so I'm extremely flattered to be here, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's start first with your past life. You're quite the Renaissance man, athlete, author of books, podcaster with Pharmaverse, leader in the executive search industry. How do these experiences play into who you are now and your goals in life?
It seems like all different experiences sort of meld together at some point in time. And when I was done playing baseball, I wanted to be a broadcaster. So I got into journalism, and that led me to getting a degree in English literature to play into my creative writing. I love creative writing. Poetry's my thing. I work on poetry basically every morning. It's like a brain teaser. But, you know, now as an executive recruiter, I'm interviewing people all the time, like I did in journalism. And on the podcast, I'm interviewing people. So it's just interesting how all these experiences that seemed compartmentalized all became who I am today, including theater. I know you have a theater background too. You know, so all these different things have all made me who I am, and where it goes from here, I can't really tell you.
So, from your vantage point of being an executive search person, sitting between hiring managers and candidates, what do you see that most candidates and hiring managers are missing?
I think the biggest disconnect that candidates and hiring managers have is there's really two of them. One, I would say, is how time's perceived. So for a candidate, time is elongated. And for a hiring manager, it's very short. So for instance, let's say there's an interview that takes place on Monday and the candidate is in between jobs. And the hiring manager says, well, we're going to have a debrief on Friday. I'll get back to you next Wednesday. To a candidate, that's an eternity. But to a hiring manager, you know, because hiring is just one of a million things they have going, that is a very short amount of time. So I think hiring managers and candidates both need to understand that time is perceived completely differently from each party. The second thing where I think there's the biggest disconnect is in this relationship that I call the buyer and the seller. Inherently, both people want to be a buyer, but the companies usually feels like they're the buyer and the candidate needs to sell them on their background. But what needs to happen is there needs to be some selling from the company so that the candidate is doing some buying. What I'm finding, even in this down market, is that companies that don't do enough selling don't get a sale at the end. So I would say one of the biggest disconnects is time, how time's perceived. But then the second one is who's the buyer and who's the seller in the relationship. And the reality is both people have to do selling and both people are eventually buyers. So I would say those are the two biggest misses that candidates and hiring managers have.
Do some companies think that they can do it on their own? I mean, why is it structurally difficult for oncology leadership teams to objectively assess talent without an external partner?
Companies can hire on their own. There's no doubt. I mean, I think a lot of companies that try to do it are trying to save cost, and you can remodel your bathroom on your own as well, and you would save cost. but it doesn't mean that it would be necessarily better. Usually when you do the cheap, the inexpensive route, it doesn't tend to be better. Sometimes it can be. But one of the things that I notice when companies try to hire on their own, they are very fixated on qualifications in a person's resume because that's all they have. Here's an applicant, here's the resume. Recruiters are very focused on the people. They know the people that they're recruiting. And because we know the person beyond the CV, we know who's going to be the best cultural fit. We know who's going to be in the money. We know who is motivated for the right reasons. And so, for all those reasons, the rate of candidates accepting a job and sticking are much higher through a recruiting agency than trying to hire on their own. But I think the bigger issue that ends up happening when companies want to hire on their own, they end up pulling from just a few companies because that's where everybody came from. So there ends up being this homogenization of thought. When you go from an external recruiter, you're pulling from their complete network versus your finite network. And so you get a lot of great ideas from a lot of different people that have had a lot of different experiences. And you avoid that homogenization of thought. So, Kirk, can they do it on their own? Absolutely. But I think the bigger question is, should they?
Well, using talent as a perhaps strategic signal, what does executive movement reveal about a company?
From a candidate point of view, it really depends on where the company is. If they're evaluating a company and a candidate is interviewing and then the hiring manager leaves in the middle of that process, that's happened. That's a disaster to the candidate pool. But when you think about it from, other employees at the company, if a company is near a data readout and one of the key executives leaves, well, that can signal to the market that something bad might be coming. Other times, depending on where they are, a key executive moving on could signal that there's a cultural misalignment or some infighting going on. But all of it doesn't really create a great optic when executives leave. And so that's all the more reason why, people should potentially use a recruiter that can smooth over and structure the narrative to the candidate community.
So, how does utilizing executive search for leadership hires distinguish oncology organizations?
Well, it really signals to the candidate community, especially if it's a retained search, that they're serious about finding the best person. So that I think is the biggest signal that is sent is that not only is their asset important to them, the therapy, but that they truly value people as their number one asset. So I think that's what it tells the candidate community when retained search goes out or even a contingent search goes out. But I think on the flip side of that, if you go to too many contingent agencies, really, you should go with one or even two is be the max. But like some companies want to use five. So if they go to too many contingent searches at once, that also sends a negative signal to the candidate community.
In oncology, where clinical, regulatory, medical, and commercial must operate in tight coordination, how do leadership silos show up in hiring decisions?
I would say the biggest way that these silos happen is it shows up really when a company can't align on who the right candidate is. So one stakeholder thinks this is what good looks like, and then another stakeholder thinks this is what good looks like, and then the hiring manager thinks a whole nother picture. And when they have to get consensus to make the hire, those silos and the lack of a bridge between silos is really evident. So, what I would recommend is that before the search goes out, get aligned on what good looks like. And then to the candidate, it really shows that there's an alignment and it's not a siloed organization.
From a candidate's perspective now, what makes an oncology leadership team compelling versus risky?
I would say the same thing from the company's point of view to a candidate. They want to see a good track record. They want to see, stability. They want to see that the leadership team has been at places that were successful, that they know how to do it, that they've had successful launches. So that's what they look for in the leadership team. I think it's the same way from the leadership team to the candidate. They want to see stability and a track record and success too. So I think it's very similar on both ends.
And how does the external oncology talent market evaluate leadership teams?
I would say it's the track record, but they also take a look at how the company's funded and what Wall Street is saying about the company. Because I think people value that vantage point, and I think those people are smart and they got a lot of skin in the game, so they've probably done their homework more than a candidate might. So if Wall Street is bullish on the company and the people that are there have had success in launching products and so on, and the technology is interesting to the person, I think that sends a really strong signal that this is a company to go for.
And from the candidate's perspective, what signals do sophisticated oncology candidates use to assess whether a company is aligned and credible?
I would say very similar to the last question. They're looking for, who's on the board of directors and what is the track record for success. Sometimes they'll look for where the company's based, like where the drug came out of. Like, did it come out of MD Anderson? Did it come out of, Fred Hutch? Did it come out of Memorial Sloan Kettering? That lends to a lot more credibility. If it's a founder led company and the founder's really hasn't done anything before, it could cause a little trepidation. And so all those things combined, the really sophisticated candidates, determine whether or not it's a company they want to go for.
Oncology moves quickly. So, what happens when the leadership hiring in oncology lags behind the scientific or strategic evolution?
This is really where some of your earlier questions kind of marry together. Hiring is a speed game. And if you take too long to hire, everything lags behind. And what I see as a big mistake that a lot of companies make is the data reads out and then they realize, oh my gosh, we are months behind in hiring. So I would say you want to always be in talent, hoarding talent. You want to, if a talented person comes across your desk, a quarter before you were going to hire that person, that might be someone to snag even or try to get the headcount approved, because you want to be in a talent grab mode as you're building a company. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that would be my best advice there.
So, when do organizations realize they don't have a recruiting problem, they have a leadership architectural problem?
Consensus interviewing, which means everybody on the interview team has to agree to hire the person. When we have consensus interviewing, it's really a leadership issue, because what ends up happening is one person may have something negative to say about the person, or one person may not say, yeah, let's go for this person, but everybody else might. And the hiring manager may say, I want to hire this person. And someone from an organization, removed from the hiring manager may veto it. There are a lot of companies that try to interview that way. And I think that is a major mistake. I have 3 daughters, and sometimes we're all trying to agree on where to eat. And mom wants to go to this place, I want to go to that place, and the kids want to go to different places. It's hard to find consensus really in anything. So the way I advise companies is to think of it like the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? One person has to make the decision. That's the person playing the game. But at times, the interview team is that group of people that they can phone a friend. So let's say the medical director's not the hiring manager, but on the interview team. Ask them, how was their depth of therapeutic knowledge? Then maybe the commercial person was there and said, okay, how do you feel like they would play well with the commercial side of the house? Get their opinion, but you are the one that has to choose the answer as the hiring manager versus the whole collective team making the decision. So that is the biggest weakness that I see in companies that try to do consensus interviewing. It's really a leadership architecture problem, not a recruiting problem.
No, I think so. And I have a feeling, Michael, that you don't win the argument of where you're going to eat very often with 3 daughters and your wife. So if you have that secret, let me know. Very important question to me now is, what do strong oncology organizations do differently than other organizations?
I would say, and this could sound self-serving, they pay more. And I work with primarily small oncology biotechs. And what I see happening in the talent market is the opposite of what's happening in the M&A market. So the M&A market is small company develops a drug, big pharma goes and buys them. Well, what's happening in the talent market is big pharma develops a candidate, an employee, trains them, small pharma goes and out buys them. So the best oncology biotechs are out there. They pay more. They want to attract the top free agents in the market that can really move the needle, the people that have relationships, the people that can gain advocacy. If you liken it to sports, there are some teams that can go and buy the top free agent, like the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, and so on. And then there's some markets that just can't. So what separates oncology organizations are the ones that can go and get the top free agent, the one that can move the needle for them, that can leverage past relationships the most. That's what separates the best oncology organizations.
Oncology executive teams reframed one thing about talent tomorrow. What would create the biggest strategic shift?
I feel like the external recruiting industry is broken. It's in the mind of a lot of companies, it's too expensive. But if the service we provided was free, everybody would use an external recruiter. So there's value there. It's just might be too expensive for some companies, especially in this market where money's hard to come by and everybody has a burn rate. So what I would suggest, and this is sort of turning things on its head to reframe things, as your question said, is companies could partner with a select group of specialists. And I say specialists because you want someone that really knows the market in that specific domain. And what you should do is put that person on a monthly retainer. Instead of paying per head, I don't think that's going to be the future of recruiting. I think paying a year-long, almost like subscription service. And that way companies can manage their budget, but they can create real partnerships and they can bring the best talent in. So I think what we'll see to reframe things is more of a true partnership model versus a pay per head model. Additionally, I think the best companies understand the right type of candidate that they can attract. I'm just going to share a little framework that I use that can really help. So think of the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. So the type of candidate that would be attracted to, that I would say is north, is a stability seeker. This is a person that wants a big pharma, that wants predictability, that wants a deep pipeline. That person, if their main motivator is that, let's just call them north. The opposite of that is a person that stability's fine, but it's not their main motivator. Their main motivator is equity and having skin in the game. They really see employment as a skin, like a sweat equity partnership. So a person can't be a north-south, just like you can't go north-south. So if that's north and that's south, then east and west is, let's start with east. East tends to be someone that is really motivated by the technology. They geek out on the science. It has to be on the cutting edge of technology. And if that's their main motivator, then they're an east person. The west person is mostly thinking about career advancement, moving up the ladder. And if that's their main motivator, then they're a west. Now, what I tend to find is people are a combination of both. So they're either a northwest or a northeast or something. So if a big pharma company is hiring someone that's a south focused person, well, that's going to be a disastrous hire for both parties. So I see that is the biggest issue in hiring today, is that companies try to hire people that they should never have tried to hire. And that's where an executive recruiter can come in and help them understand that that person's not ever going to be a long-term cultural fit.
So, Michael, I want to thank you for the time you spent with us today. It was very insightful, some great ideas, and I learned a lot. So I hope that we can do it again sometime. And I wish you luck in all your endeavors, the many, many things that you do so well. So, Michael, thank you.
Thank you for having me, Kirk. Really appreciate it.
That's it for this episode. I'm Dr. Kirk Shepard. Thanks for listening and for being a part of the conversation that's moving oncology forward.